Okay, so let's start. I'm happy to see you, like faces which you already saw in the previous meetings. It's really nice that you guys join us every meeting. So today we have an amazing company, Pandata, and from this company we have two speakers, Espen and Marco. They will present today their use cases and also tell a little bit about the company. I also would like to remind a little bit about the rules on these meetings or pieces of advice here. I would like to ask you to turn on the camera, please, because it's much more easier to talk to the people whose faces I can see. And that's all other people can see, and it's like a real meeting. Also, ask questions, don't be afraid. Don't wait for Q&A session to ask what you're interested, because it's what important. It's a meeting, it's free discussion, and just feel free to ask them. The third piece of advice is just be open, be curious, and maybe Pandata will become your next dream job. Thank you. So guys, the floor is yours. Espen, Marco.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the nice introduction. Yeah, let me quickly share my screen, and I'm very happy to have the honor today to tell you a bit about our company, Pandata, and then Espen will tell you a bit more about what we do in our daily practice and a bit more of the mentioned use cases. I'm one of the founders. I used to be at Rocket Internet long ago, still in the golden ages back then, and then went into a freelance career, and that was kind of the basis for what is now Pandata. That was 5 years ago, and yeah, I mean, I do a lot of other stuff as well. For example, I host a digital analytics meetup in Berlin, and I'm part of an association on business intelligence where I do events. So if you're interested here and there, you can find a few events that I host or co-host. Yeah, so much about me now, about Pandata. We're a team of almost 30 people. We're growing quite a lot right now and expect to be even a bit more soon. And we're based in Berlin. As you can see, it's super sunny today here, which is actually quite nice. I don't know how it is in Warsaw. Our clients are mostly large companies. Many of them are from Germany, but also increasingly international. We don't do any marketing except for speaking at an event here and there, or maybe co-writing or co-authoring an article or something like that. So we get our clients only through recommendations, actually, and this is why our customer base is a bit, I would say, centered around Germany, but we can really see that this also opens up, and that we also have clients from abroad every once in a while, which is quite nice. We're an entirely self-funded company, which is also very important for us, and that means on one hand we grow a bit slower than how we were used from Rocket Internet, but on the other hand we obviously have a great degree of freedom on what we want the company to be like, because we don't have any investors sitting in our neck and telling us what we need to do. And yeah, this is something that we also want from the entire team, from everybody who joins, that he or she also leaves a footprint and shapes the company together with us. Now, I already talked a lot about the company, and you still don't really know what we're doing. So this is the next thing that I'm going to talk about. Most of our work is centered around what we like to call the data value chain, and it can help to explain a bit what we usually work on. So we're a service provider. We don't have, Pandata is not a product. Pandata is basically a data consultancy. And usually around the data value chain, we do the following things. We work with data gathering that can be, for example, web analytics or web tracking, where we measure how users behave on websites, but we also collect data from many different other sources, like for example, this can be a Facebook or some machinery data or some order book data that we get from a company. And usually we collect all of those and combine them. And this is what leads us to the next step. Then we need to store and process the data. We usually set up some kind of data warehousing architecture. And then we help the clients process the data and make sure that they have one place where everything goes. And then we also help to make the data usable by creating dashboards, reports, basically generating insights from the data, but also feeding it into other system or into machine learning or data science applications. And this is why we like to call it the data value chain, because you can see it's from creation of the data to basically its final use. Typical questions that clients ask us about that we get approached with are, for example, hey, look, we're testing a new product here. Can you help us evaluate data performance? Can you help us use data to evaluate the performance? Or we run a lot of marketing campaigns. Can you help us to figure out what the ROI of those is? And I mean, you have a few examples here. Generally, there is a spectrum of questions. Some of them are super specific, like the second example of the ones that I showed you here. So while others are super broad, like the third example, hey, we believe we have interesting data. Can we do anything with it? And yeah, it can be anything on that spectrum. So it's quite diverse, I would say, what we're doing. We're also not really focused on an industry. You could say that we have a bit of a focus group in marketing and in media, but that is just, I believe, because those are sectors that are naturally very much inclined to work with data. And generally, we have worked with all kinds of sectors and also systems, because we usually say when you understand the concept, the tool doesn't matter as much anymore. And this is why we can usually apply our data knowledge in a wide variety of contexts. Good. Now I'm going to talk a bit about culture and the company. I'm showing you these nice pictures. The two guys on the right, the upper guy is my co-founder, and the guy in the lower right corner is me, both working on very important projects, as you can see. And yeah, I mean, what is important for us in culture is we want to work with self-responsible people, and we don't want to be the micromanagers that tell you what to do, but in fact, we want to be that even on the least level possible. So we want to work with people who thrive in an environment of total freedom, where you can basically structure the work as you want. You can use Pandata as a platform or as a canvas to do the things that you want to do. That is why we always had a bit of a hard time to tell the public about the cool stuff and perks, if you want, like usually other companies do that. And I think we have quite a lot of them, but we don't want to see company perks as kind of part of a compensation package, because that's just not what it is for us. We just want to create kind of the company we wanted to work ourselves in. And that is, for example, why we said actually 3 times, for 3 times already now, that we want to take a larger trip in February. Unfortunately, this year, obviously, it wasn't possible. Last year, we were super lucky to make it to Thailand just before everything happened. And yeah, those were always really, really good experiences. And we have a few other things that are somewhat similar that you would refer to as perks in other companies, but we don't really see it that way. Like we we cover for the public transport ticket. We offer language courses, coaching. You can sign up for getting a food box delivered and things like that. But it's much more because this is something that we wanted to create with the company. And it's also something that is open to everybody who works with us and is actually highly encouraged to use the company to create things together with us. Yeah, and in that regard also, we started implementing what we refer to as purpose time, which is basically every Wednesday afternoon is off and free for everybody to use at their own disposal, because we believe there are other things than work too. And we want to give people a chance to follow their other passions as well. Espen is actually quite good on that one. I think he does super interesting stuff. Maybe he could tell a bit more about that in a second. But before we go there, and I'm going to also finish with that, please do apply. We're definitely looking for great people. And I mean, it's super hard to find people who want to and are able to work in an environment where you have a very technical side as well as a businessy side, and you always need to combine the two in a way. And yeah, we're very much interested in meeting you and getting to know you and potentially working together. Please though use the platform, the job portal that you can access through our website. There you find a wide variety of different positions that are open. We're currently filling all kinds of data roles, but also, for example, a role for business development and a few other more administrative roles. Right now, actually, the company is super lean. We have barely any people who don't work on data directly, and since we're reaching a size where this becomes a bit difficult, we're actually also opening up a few positions there. Yeah, so much from my side. Espen is actually one of our data engineers and an absolute expert for data science topics, and also in his free time and in his purpose time, he does really cool stuff with machine learning and art, which I think is also super worthwhile sharing. But he will talk today about marketing and data science. Espen, over to you.
Thank you so much, Marco. And also thanks to Kate for moderating this meeting and talk. Let me share my screen.
So maybe like at this stage, somebody have questions already? Okay. Sorry for interruption.
All good. Maybe then a little bit about me. My background is actually physics. I started physics in the Netherlands, and through my kind of research and my thesis, I kind of stumbled into the data world. And then I did some small jobs of working as like a data sort of engineer, data scientist, and then in some way I stumbled to Berlin, and then kind of by luck found Pandata. And since then, I've been working on like finding fun solutions for different data problems. I do that in Pandata, for example, now on the topic of data-driven marketing that we'll dive into shortly. But for my own stuff, what I have been doing, I was doing quite a lot of deep learning, quite a lot of computer vision, and I started kind of looking into how can we use these models to generate stuff that looks fun or looks cool. So over the last years, I've been doing quite a lot of stuff with StyleGAN, as you guys may know, which is a generative network that you can kind of train to show you all kinds of, for example, you can learn it what a table looks like, but it learns that in shitty ways. So you get all these funny things, and I use that for some paintings that I make as input and stuff. But more on that later. What we'll do now is that we'll first dive into one of the use cases of the work that we do at Pandata. And the one that we're covering today is basically data-driven marketing, and then specifically the question of revenue or conversion attribution, and how we can do that using something like a Markov chain to find out how how certain marketing campaigns are performing. Basically, the first question that we kind of have to ask is, why do people actually do marketing? And that's kind of easy to break down, because the first one is to find out the goals of the users or the customers that use our platform or our service or our shop, to find out what do they want. And the second one is a little bit deeper, and that is to use these learnings to create, communicate, and deliver offerings that provide value for the customer itself, for clients, partners, and also if it works perfectly for a society as a whole. So it actually has a more broader meaning. There is a more traditional way of doing that, and that's built on two main pillars. And the one is the usage of studies of the market that we're covering, and the second one is actually basically the harnessing of the knowledge that is already there in a person that is in the marketing team. So obviously, someone that has been working in marketing for a long time will have seen a lot of different use cases, will have seen the industry, and will therefore have a lot of knowledge that can be used to define a marketing strategy. That approach makes a lot of sense and is in no way wrong, or and it's in no way wrong. But the downside is there is a chance for trial and error, that something is tried out, and then later we see, okay, this didn't really reflect in for example, higher traffic or more revenue. So there's this process of figuring out what is the right thing to do. And of course, while this process is taking place, I might not be generating the most conversions that I could, or I might not be generating the most revenue that I could in this span of time. And this is something where kind of data-driven marketing comes in, because it has one main goal, and that is the continuous and also instantaneous insights into the different processes that are taking place on our platform. So, for example, constantly seeing what is happening within, for example, the user journeys. What is happening in the different market segments that we're seeing? How are our new clients finding us, and what is happening there? Because obviously this is constantly happening, and if we have to wait for a separate study on the market that we're in, we're kind of losing time. So the whole thing that data-driven marketing is about is constantly using the data that we have to gain a deeper look or like understanding of these processes that are of importance to the market that we're in. And to kind of drive that point home, so there we're going to be looking at the problem of attribution. The problem is actually a direct result of the transition of marketing mostly being offline to going online now. Because the fact that it's online, we can track the marketing campaigns, channels, and also how visitors are seeing the platform that we have, the shop that we might be running, and we can track how they get there. And basically the main question when it comes down to attribution is we have all these different campaigns that we're running. We maybe have a newsletter, or maybe have a couple of Facebook campaigns, something on Twitter, something on LinkedIn. We may have people coming in directly, and these users, they can be generating revenue through their conversions. But how do we actually determine where that revenue is being generated in the network that we have of all these different ways of being on the platform? Well, that problem is the attribution platform. So we're trying to have a look into what is actually driving the conversions that we have. And then also, if we know that, we can also say something about the impact of the marketing that we're currently doing. So this has been done for quite a while already, and there is like a standard way of doing this that a lot of companies currently use. And that is actually also, again, rooted in this knowledge of knowing what the process should look like. It is based on rules and someone arguing, for example, in a web shop, if someone comes in through a Google keyword ad or like a search ad, they're on a platform, and then and then they look for that certain project, and then they look for that certain product, and then they buy it or they don't. And if that journey is quite simple, or we know, or we have a lot of knowledge about the marketing segment that we're in, it's quite doable to come up with certain rules and say, okay, we think that the last click before the purchase might make sense and made that user to convert, or it could be that they're that it's maybe linear. So the touch points are just as important as the last one. This is also perfectly valid, but it becomes a lot harder once the user journey becomes a lot more complex. And of course, if I have something like a web shop, that might be doable because the paths are a lot shorter. But if we have a case where that's not the case, then it becomes a lot harder to come up with a rule that will make sense for all the different journey types that we're seeing. And that's also a problem that we ran into for a client, which was a content-based platform. So a platform where people can go onto and then, for example, watch a video, read a blog post, see a slideshow, and then based on that content, they can decide to subscribe or not. For example, in a week, to give you like a sense of the numbers, we would have 50 million sessions. For those sessions, for how people reach the site, there were 100,000 different types of ways of actually starting that session. And then for the content that they were viewing on a weekly basis was about 300,000 different blog posts, articles, media. And so you can imagine when I have this volume of different kind of paths or points that someone can take when reaching the website or doing their thing on the platform, it becomes really hard to say, okay, I think it must be the last one, because these journeys become so complex. And that's also kind of what you see on the right-hand side, because this is like a network of these journeys, of what they look like. And then it becomes, you see that even when I just have 9 different points that people can visit, already the configuration and the different types of journeys that exist become more complex and more complex. So it's quite hard to say for a single journey, I think it's going to be the first point or the second or the third, and then my revenue is mostly generated by those. So what we have to do here, we have to let the data speak for itself. And that's why we kind of, and that's then of course why this approach is then data driven, because we're harnessing all these 50 million journeys that we have in order to gain sort of this look into what is actually happening in this process of users going through our platform. Of course, when we want to look at the data, we can do that journey by journey. We can't look at one and then say, we're seeing this, and in the second one, we're seeing this. Oh, so it might be that we see these dynamics. We need a tool or a toolbox to look at all this data to make sense of it. And we're basically doing that in the form of a network. We're seeing the journeys not as a single journey by itself, but as a set of journeys that span a network of how people can scroll through our platform. So we have different nodes, and a node in itself can be a content point, for example, an article, but a node can also be a way of how the user reached the site. So for example, a Facebook. And then a user can go from that node to the next. And basically that a transition we call a link, and it happens with a certain probability. And that probability we can determine based on all those user journeys that we see. So based on that full set of how users transversed the network that we call our platform, we can kind of build this model that shows us on a kind of better way what is actually happening in that network. And the first thing that it gives us is something that we call a transition matrix. What that does, it shows the probability of going from a certain touch point that we have somewhere in that network to a different one. So that can be from blog post A to blog post B, but it can also be from Facebook ad 1 to blog post 2, and then from blog post 2 to blog post 3, and then to conversion. And of course, when you look at this graph, you can already see that the probabilities of going from one spot to the next have different values. And of course, already that we can use to see, for example, okay, what if that probability is really low? And then there must be something that's happening at that certain point in the user journey where users feel like, okay, I don't want to go on. At this next step, I don't want to take. So for example, it could be that that article is not finished, or the content is viewed as vulgar maybe. And then we can already use this to pinpoint certain locations in this network of going through the platform that might be causing problems in this process of reaching conversions. But of course, if we take a step back, we thought about the revenue and our marketing that we spent on it, and we actually want to see where's the revenue that we had over this span of time coming from. And of course, that's something that we don't get naturally from this matrix. So that's basically the next step is kind of how to determine the actual value of a touch point being there. And that is done with something that we call the removal, influence, or effect. Basically what we do, we have a complete network that spans all the different paths that someone can take, all the different lefts, rights, middle that someone can choose when they go through our network. And they might end up converting, or they might not. What we do to determine the importance of one of those decisions or one of those points on the road where they can choose to go on or stop, we take that one link out of the network. We take that one touch point and we say, okay, we pretend that this one is not there, and then we kind of simulate all the journeys that we saw, and we see, okay, if we don't have that touch point there, what then happens to the revenue that we generate? And of course, by the fact that a touch point is not there, there'll be journeys that stop at that point that would normally have continued towards converting. And then the loss of revenue that we have by the fact that a certain touch point wasn't there is then what we use to determine how important was this touch point for actually generating the revenue. And we do that for all the different blog posts, all the different Facebook ads, all the different keywords that were used. Determine, okay, what is then the relative importance of these certain points in a network that we have in order to generate revenue. And when we think back about the use case, we're talking about 300,000 different articles, 100,000 different marketing touch points. And then the good thing about sort of using a Markov chain is that it's super scalable. So there's no way so we don't have to say, okay, we're gonna reduce the granularity. We don't have to say, okay, using these blog posts by themselves is too hard. We're gonna group them by category. We don't have to do that. We can just chuck in all the user journeys, have the model do its calculation, and determine the ones that are the most significant, and get us that basically that revenue back on a very granular scale, which is very nice because for example, for a page search campaign, we can see for a specific keyword what the revenue was that certain campaign running that certain keyword was causing. And of course, that's perfect when you want to see how sort of the marketing that we have been doing and the marketing that we're planning is actually performing in the light of the revenue that we want to generate. So this sounds very nice, obviously, and like this perfect thing that we can do for most of the clients, and just one click of the button. But obviously, there's no such thing as free cake. In this case, the cake is very cheap, but we still have to pay a tiny bit. And a big thing that we have to do in order to make this possible is actually have the data there to do this. What I was constantly talking about is the fact that we have the user journeys and we know what the user journey looks like. We know where they start, we know what they read, we know where it ends. And of course, that's not always the case for every single company that you work with. For example, most companies have GA, and through their views and their filtering, they have some sense of what is happening on their website. But to have their user journey on a user journey level, for example, you need to have Google 360, which is again something that you need to have in order to do this. And the second point is, in order to make these user journeys, you still have to stitch them. For example, it could be that a single user is browsing from their laptop or from their mobile phone, but it still belongs to the same journey. And of course, this process of bringing that data together has to happen before you feed it into this model to see where the revenue is coming from. And of course, constantly we have been talking about revenue. But then sometimes there's also the question, what revenue do I use? For example, if it's a web shop, it might make quite a lot of sense to use the face value of the conversion. So a product was $40, so then the value that we used was 40. But for example, when you have a platform where the conversion is a subscription, and then maybe using the face value doesn't make sense because the first month is only $1, and then the next month it's 15. So then it makes a lot more sense to have a look at something like the lifetime value, and then your problem becomes a little bit more complex because you also have the lifetime value to calculate. And that's also something that we saw, for example, with one of our clients. We saw that that calculation was it was also something that we kind of had to take care of in order to make this model fit. And then the last one is more of a technical one, and that is when I know how this model works, I have my data that's perfectly ready in order to be seen by a Markov chain. And then the last question is, how do I actually run this model in production in such a way that the client can actually see the results easily? How do I schedule it such that the model is run every day? What do I do with the data that's coming out? How do I feed it back? Do I build a nice dashboard for it? Because currently, for example, in GA, there's no button that says, please do Markov chain on my data. There has to be this stack around it to make a kind of the power of this model usable by the client. And in a way that's really fun because there's a lot for us to do and there's a lot for us to learn, but it also takes a little bit more work to make that ready. And then that kind of brings me to the conclusion of this topic that we have been talking about, which is basically, if you have complex user journeys and you have a lot of marketing channels with a lot of different keywords and a lot of different ads that you want to know of how they perform, and the journeys are so complex that you have a lot of trouble defining certain rules that describe this process, and also, this is the big one, you have the data to look at, then it might be worthwhile to look at something like a Markov chain to do data-driven attribution, and that could have a lot of value to you, your client, or your team. Yeah, and that's basically the thing I wanted to show you about the work that we do at Pandata. This was a case that's actually super relevant. I've been working on this the last couple of months. It has been a lot of fun for us to learn about this because like a couple months ago, we had no clue either. We did have some hunches about how this could be done, but it's constantly what we do is we take on a project and we think, how can we make this process better? How can we learn from it? How can we grow together? And it's also that we would love to do together with you guys. So again, to reiterate, if you feel like this is something that you would love to be doing, visit our website, go to the job portal, and maybe we'll see you in a month. And that was it. Thank you so much.
Thank you a lot. This was actually really amazing. So guys, maybe you have some questions already.
Yeah, I have a question. Can you hear me?
Sure.
Yeah, again.
Okay, so my question is, do you look for part-time employees or not? Because
yeah, I mean, we can definitely make different arrangements happen. So that is, I mean, we already have a few people who work part-time. I think Espen is also a good example, who works for 4 days a week, right?
Yeah, 4. I work
4. But we also have people who work 3 days, so different arrangements are definitely possible.
Okay, so, and of course, you can do it like, how to say it, remotely, I guess?
Yeah, it's possible. I mean, at some point we would probably prefer everyone to be back in Berlin, because I mean, there are a few things that you cannot do remotely, like, we really enjoy being a very tightly knit team, so to say, and that is not possible if everybody is working remotely. I mean, right now, obviously, that's not a problem at all, but at some point, we would prefer if everyone would come back to Berlin.
Of course. Okay, thank you.
Any
I have
other
a question.
Please, sorry.
Sorry, I have a question about those user journeys. Do you take into consideration the speed of traverse between these vertices, and does it influence the revenue or other parameters?
So that's actually a very good question. What we're currently doing now is that we're not looking at the time how long someone is at a certain point. Well, what we are taking into, Jesus, give me some time. What we do is that we use kind of this limit for how long the step can be between certain journeys, because of course what you're doing, you're stitching them together, and you have this kind of time horizon or limit how far you can stitch back. So it is in there implicitly, but it would be a really cool step, for example, to weight these transitions based on the time they spent on an article. So that would be like the next step for like a next model, is to say, for example, okay, I have a blog post and it's viewed for 10 minutes instead of maybe 30, and then the fact that someone is there probably has more value compared to that 30 seconds session. So you are very right. That's a good thing to take into consideration, and that's something that we kind of have for like a future model to take in there.
I got it. Thank you.
Guys, any other questions? Feel free.
Yeah, I have one. First of all, thank you for the share. It was really awesome. And what tips do you have for someone that is entering this data world and wants to thrive in it?
I think that's that depends very much on individual situation, I would say. I mean, we actually have a few people who did something like a coding bootcamp, but also on the other hand, coding bootcamps are quite expensive, and we're not necessarily saying that this is the way to go. I think just getting yourself into a project is the best way for learning. I mean, there's obviously a lot of courses around, but only doing a course is usually very, yeah, it often lacks practical application, right? So just working on something that doesn't necessarily generate money, but something that where you have an actual outcome, I think will be a much easier way to get a foot in the door, because then you can actually show that yeah, you've done something, you've worked on something, and this usually teaches you more than doing a course, I would say. Like a proof of concept, for instance. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, there are many kinds of projects, right? Yeah, sure. But I don't know. There's Kaggle competitions and stuff like that. It depends a bit on what you want to do, right? But I think we believe very much in on-the-job training. So we also have hired people without any coding knowledge at all, and taught them everything they needed to know. And this can also work really, really well. And it works because we believe strongly that you would learn the best on the job. And so obviously, if you don't have the job yet, I was wondering about what kind of things you could do in order to emulate this. This was my my train of thought.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, so maybe I will ask a couple of questions from Wire and Data Science Club side. So previously you said that some people does not have any coding experience. So how the ideal candidate looks like? What characteristics, what trait of character, I don't know, personality maybe, what you're looking for?
Well, there's mostly there's basically only three things we look for in a candidate, and that is smart, motivated, and a team fit. And the rest can be taught, right? If somebody is smart, he or she can learn everything they need to know. If somebody is motivated, they will also do it, and if they're a team fit, then we will also be willing to teach them. So if those three requirements are met, I think no other prerequisites need to be filled. Obviously, if somebody brings a bit of coding experience in whatever language it be, is definitely helpful. So, but it's not needed necessarily.
So how do the recruitment process looks like then? How do you check this clever, if the person is smart, fits the team, and motivated?
Well, I mean, it's not easy, certainly, and I mean, knowing if somebody fulfills this is really hard. So I think our recruitment process is not very scalable yet, but it doesn't really need to. I mean, back at Rocket Times, I mean, the company I worked there at scaled in 10 months from 25 people to 320. And this is something we don't have to do and will never have to do. So obviously they have completely different processes than we do. For us, it's still very manual and still very human powered, I would say. So every candidate, every person who works with us at least spoke once either with my colleague Wolfgang or me, and we'll meet several people from the team throughout the process. And it usually has like 3 stages, so 3 different calls that we would do with a candidate. But yeah, I mean, it's a lot of feeling, like if we click or not. And yeah, I mean, sometimes we also make wrong decisions. It's like it's the reality, unfortunately. But I think we have become pretty good at finding the right people.
Yeah. Okay. So there is no technical test in the meantime, like during the interview stages.
There's no coding test. Like we might ask a few logical questions and go through logical cases, but we don't do any coding tests.
Okay, thank you.
Yet. Maybe we'll do at some point, but for now we don't.
After our meeting today, like we will.
No, so far we don't have it planned, but I mean, it might be that at some point. I mean, I'm not sure if a coding test would be the best way to evaluate this, because I think it's fairly easy to be good at a coding test and still just get everything from Stack Overflow. So what I want to say is I'm sure it's possible to design a good coding test, but I guess it's hard to do so.
Yeah, not sure. Okay, maybe right now any other people have any other questions?
Maybe not a question, but more like a thought, combining what you just said and combining the previous question. I think that the best way of learning now is just to find a job in your company.
But
Sure.
That's the conclusion we wanted to come to, right? But thank you, that was perfect.
Okay, so my next question will be, what is the biggest challenge that someone in your company can face?
Espen, what's your biggest challenge?
I think I like a challenge that can be big. What's really nice here is because, you know, we take on a lot of people that don't necessarily have their role be very fixed, or have it be like that are super senior and they have been doing one thing for 7 years and are very good at it. But we take on a lot of junior people that can kind of see multiple parts of the company, try different teams out, see what they like, and that can be a little bit challenging for yourself because you get to see all these different parts that are fun. And then you kind of have to find your own spot in it. But the sort of challenge is a nice one because you see these different areas and then you kind of think about, okay, what direction do I want to take? There's this project, there's this one, there are these clients. And that is something that takes a little bit of time, but it's also very fun at the same time because you see that whole layer of not only doing one thing. And that was for me definitely a challenge in a way because there were so many fun things that I wanted to do, but I had to choose. And another one that might be a challenge, but that's more, I think, related to the last year. I really like working with people in person, and I really like that dynamic. So a big challenge that I had last year was, for example, in my first week, is I started from home, and then you can't see anyone in real life. And I found that like pretty hard to then sort of meet someone for the first time over a call. But of course, that's something that's very much related just to now, I guess. But those were my challenges.
Yeah, I see this. Especially it's hard when people like just start to join the company and they're like working online.
Yeah, for sure.
So how like the person, let's say the young student enters your company, how their days will look like or what they will do? They will already like, they will start to work on the project immediately, or there will be like some training, as you said previously. But I mean, if like a student, let's say, knows a little bit about programming, or how he or she will meet people from your company.
So, I mean, there were times when we just threw people in the cold water and saw if they swam. That worked surprisingly well, actually. And I mean, as said, it's how you learn a lot. Now, since the company grew a bit bigger and yeah, we're all a bit more mature. So I would say we have a pretty good onboarding by now, where new people would get sessions with different people, and also everyone gets assigned basically a mentor that will take care of the person. And but still, one thing that we want to retain is that you get responsibility from day one, and we don't want people to, I don't know, read pages of some boring company documentation, or I don't know. I mean, I remember when I used to work at a big southern German company before Rocket, and I think the first days I was only reading stuff on the intranet because nobody gave me anything to do. And this is not how we want the first days to be. So even though we have a bit more of a formal onboarding and actual onboarding sessions and stuff, you would really get responsibility already from day one.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So maybe other people have also questions. Okay, so how do you see your company in the future? How it will develop?
Well, I mean, we will definitely become a bit bigger, but the thing is, we don't want to lose the spirit and the values that we have. So we will certainly not grow at the expense of this and at any cost. So we certainly have, I would say, quite ambitious growth plans, but we would sacrifice them every day for retaining our culture and our values.
Mm-hmm. But as you said before, like this difference on the rocket science, you had the example about that they grow from like 20 people to 320, something like this. So you want to be like, you want to have also this increase so fast, or?
No, that's absolutely not realistic. I mean, as a self-funded company, I think that is completely out of our reach. And also as a consulting company, we scale with humans, right? So we don't have the product that will explode at some point and go hockey stick. But we will rather grow slowly with the people, with becoming more people. So I don't think that's an option. I mean, I won't be able to give you exact numbers on how quickly we will grow, but we will grow substantially slower than that, and that is fine.
But I think it's also an advantage because like the team spirit will be still the same, and it will be like properly increasing, not just like jump and yeah, okay. Maybe other people have questions.
Actually, Norbert asked a question in the chat. Is there a possibility to work remotely 100% of the time? And I mean, yes, right now for sure. I don't know how it will develop in the future. I mean, it depends a bit on how the world changes in the future. I think I feel like as a company, you have to open yourself now to the possibility of people working remotely, because that's, I think, the direction of in which the world goes. Still, I feel like we would be sacrificing a lot because we're such so close as a team, and I think as a pure remote worker, this is hard to emulate somehow. This is hard to be as integrated. So I hope at least that there will be a chance that we will be at least mostly back in the office and be working together from there. I feel like I didn't answer your question now. I will try to make this short. Yes, right now it is possible. Will it be possible in the future? I would say yes, probably, but maybe we will have to ask for some presence time. Thanks for asking the question, Howard.
So maybe other people? Be brave, come on.
Yeah, I do have one more. It's kind of a personal question, I guess, but I'm curious. What's your background, Marco? I think Espen told us that he comes from physics, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. What's your background?
I did computer science and media in my bachelor's, and then I did a master called European Business, which doesn't exist anymore, but it's basically an economics master for people who didn't do economics in their bachelor's.
So your thesis was about economics and business?
Yeah, I guess I'm a bit weird in that regard, because during my computer science bachelor, I thought, okay, I don't want to do programming anymore. So I wrote a thesis about business models. And during my economics master, I thought, computers are actually cool. And I wrote about Bitcoin back then. Back then, nobody called it blockchain because it wasn't 2013 and nobody knew what blockchain was. But I wrote about Bitcoin, and so it was fairly technical again. So but I guess I'm not really a role model on that one.
Well, it should be a Bitcoin in 2013.
Yeah, I mean,
time.
I honestly, I just calculated the other day, had I instead of paid tuition, just invested all of my money in Bitcoin. I don't know where I would be right now, but maybe on a nice beach and not in front of a computer. Yeah, kidding.
Thank you.
So was it hard to start your own company?
I actually get the question quite a lot, and I would say it's much harder now than it was back then, because when you start, you don't have much to lose. So I mean, obviously, it feels like you're taking the plunge, you're doing it, and it's actually a great feeling. But on the other hand, if you, and I think this is true for most of the, probably all of the people in this call here, if you're somewhat good qualified, and I think we're lucky enough with our industry that we're all considered to be highly qualified, you will find a job if it fails, right? So if you try to start your company and you actually do it, and then you notice after a few months that it doesn't work out, so what? Like you can always go back, right? And I mean, it's different once the company grows and once it actually works, because then you're building up something and you have something to lose. So my answer is always now it's much harder than it was to start.
You can't run from your own company.
Yeah, but I mean, it's also every decision has much greater effect now, and if things break, like the effects would be quite devastating. So I mean, so far we've been pretty lucky, and I think our decisions weren't that bad, hopefully. But it's just my take on that question. I think it becomes harder over time than being hard in the beginning.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Any other questions?
What other interesting projects have you been working on apart from this Markov chain model?
Aspen, do you want to take that one? I think.
Yeah, something, for example, we're working on now is it's kind of the analysis of TV ads and how they perform, which is quite fun to do and also quite hard, because obviously it's very, when you show like a TV ad, for example, on national television, you don't really know who is seeing it. So normally, for example, for a marketing campaign, what you could do is just do a simple test where you show it to a certain subgroup, or you don't show it to a certain subgroup. When it comes to TV ads, you could do that based on a region. So, for example, like the whole region of Berlin, I do show the ads, but to a different region, I don't, and then I look at the differences. But of course, this is not like the best way to do it, and it could be done like a lot nicer without having to like sacrifice not showing that ad to a very big group of people. So that's something that we're working on now. Is basically seeing, okay, how can we tackle this problem, and actually trying to determine who saw this ad. Like, for example, what you can think of is based on like a sign up that might have a zip code in there, and then they can tie that zip code back, for example, to the smart TV. For example, in the Netherlands, they've started doing something like personalized ads. So it's quite cool to think about possibilities in that field. For example, what we're working on now is to see, okay, what is actually then the performance of those ads in certain countries for a certain company. That's pretty cool what's happening. Yeah, we have multiple of these like projects going on where we try to look at something new, something cool, but we're also still doing loads of really cool tracking projects, which are also in the context of our whole company, are a really big thing, because sometimes you can kind of forget about a tracking in the sense, okay, that's there and that's where the data is coming from. But if the tracking is not done right, then the whole pipeline of that data value chain is kind of rotten right at the start. So sometimes it's also really cool that we have a really nice tracking project, because it really showcases the value and the importance of setting that up right. So yeah, that's what we currently have going on, for example.
And how much do you usually time spent on, for example, research and developing the models? And
so when it comes
the solutions.
Yeah. So when it comes to, for example, a project that we haven't done before, but it sounds like something we could do, we spent a couple of days doing research. And then for me, it's mostly reading papers to see what is currently out there, what is currently being done in kind of research groups, and then see how they can be transferred to the use case that we have. And that can take up to a couple days to basically build a strategy based on the models that are there out in the wild, and then see, okay, how could we scale this? How could we fit this to the data pipeline that we have? And how can we make this into something that our client could actually use? Because some models, for example, that are using research, they can be super kind of nice and good, but they might be super hard to train if the quality of the data is not perfect. That's something we have to weed out and see, okay, how well would this actually work in the field? And that can take a couple of days to kind of form that strategy for a field that we don't have a lot of knowledge on yet. And then basically sort of the amount of time that we use to tune the model, to train it right, to try different hyperparameters, for example, that is really dependent on the product itself. Because sometimes you have a model architecture that's quite simple by itself, and then you know, if I do the feature engineering right and my data pipeline makes sense, then a model itself won't need a lot of tweaking about. But if you have a certain model architecture where you have a lot of knobs to twist and to see if I need one more layer or like an extra thing, and then we also plan for that in the project itself. So we have the time needed to see what works best. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, perfectly. Thank you.
Cool. Anyone else?
I'd have a question. What technologies do you use? Because it tells also some part of the story about the projects. And
yeah, so basically, I think the main stack that we use is quite a lot.
Sorry for interruption, but something is wrong with your microphone and it's like scratches all the time.
Okay, should I hold it? Is it still happening? Oh,
No,
okay.
no, super, thank you.
Okay, so basically the standard stack that we have is that we use a BigQuery basically as the DBH. Then we use dbt and Jenkins for scheduling, and the main language we use for most of the loader scripts and transformation is all in Python. All the loaders that we have and the configurations that are written to it is all like in-house code. And when it comes down to, for example, the models that we use, for example, like the Markov Chain, I think it's written in C++, but it has like a Python wrapper on it. But we don't have like a fixed model framework that we use for all the projects. It's kind of, we look at a different project and then we see, okay, it might make sense now to use for the modeling itself, stats models, or you might use scikit-learn, or when we go deep learning, it might be Keras or something. It's not really set in stone, but it's all based around Python. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Oh, and what I forgot, we also do loads with Postgres if it's not BigQuery. So those are the two main ones when it comes to warehousing. It's either BigQuery or Postgres. Am I forgetting anything, Marco?
And the visualization of
It
data?
was perfect.
And it really depends on the client. again, so we do Looker, but it can also be something like a Tableau. It's mainly because, for example, we work then for a big company that already has, for example, a BI team, and it might be working in Looker, but the thing that we're making for them, for example, the Markov chain, has to fit in their current structure of how they visualize data. And so, for example, it could be that it's Looker, but it could also be a Tableau or something else. But generally, then what we just do is take some time to see how it works and make it work in there, which is kind of fun because it makes the project constantly have this small thing that we haven't done before, and it keeps it nice and fresh.
Yeah, and I mean, especially on visualization tools, there are so many. So I think we have already a list of 300 different tools, and many of our clients use different ones. So we usually adapt to those. And the good thing is if you set up a proper data warehouse and if you do all the data processing upfront in the right way, the visualization doesn't matter as much. You can change it easily because the logic is happening prior to the visualization. And this is usually how we go about it. So I think it's also the reason why Espen didn't even think about mentioning the visualization, because it's such a flexible part from our perspective.
Yeah, for sure. We have this kind of a concept of these different layers that are happening in the warehouse that we have, and then like the final layer will be the one that fits the visualization. And because that data by itself doesn't really have to be aggregated or pivoted or in any way, sort of fitting that to the visualization itself is generally another really big problem or something that takes a lot of time. So in that sense, we're super flexible. Anyone else or any more questions?
Actually, I have two more questions. First one is how you choose people to your companies, to your projects, like how much juniors, how much mids, how much seniors do you have in one project? How it look like? And one a little bit of HR question: what can be your perfect client?
So I mean, we don't make that much of a distinction between the senior and junior. So I mean, obviously there is different levels of seniority, but they're not as strictly defined. We have 4 team leads, which are usually ultimately responsible for a project. But we also have project owners who can be also other people than the team leads, which have a great degree of project responsibility. And then we have people who might contribute in the project. And I mean, every project has a project owner, and usually every project has a team lead assigned. There are obviously project owners who have some more independence than others, but it very much depends on the project. But it's a bit hard to say, because then, I mean, we don't have the one senior that we need in the project, but we need to have one person who has a responsibility. But it very much depends on the topic, and a person who might be responsible for one project might just contribute in another one. Usually the teams are minimum 2, maximum, I would say, 5 people on a project. Sorry, what was the HR related question again? If you could repeat that.
What would be the best client for you?
The best client. So I mean that's a hard question. I mean, the best client usually has a bit of knowledge about data themselves, because that allows us to interface with them easily. And I mean, in the best case, they have realistic expectations about what is possible. Unfortunately, that's not always a given. And I mean, the best client is also one where we can provide a lot of additional value, because I mean, I said before that we like to work with people who enjoy a degree of freedom and autonomy, and I think also as a company, we're pretty good at if we have a certain degree of autonomy and freedom to work with the company and not be the extended workbench of someone.
Okay, I see. Thanks.
Did that answer the question?
Yeah, perfectly.
Okay, guys, maybe the last question. So maybe I will ask then, what is your favorite traditions? Because from the photos, it's looked that your team is very tight and it looks amazing actually. So what traditions do you have and how do you motivate people to like be so close to each other?
I mean, we actually used to have a tradition that I liked a lot, but we didn't do it in a while. On one hand, because we, I don't know, it just faded out, I think. But we did the Monday shots when somebody started. I really like that.
They didn't do that for me. I miss
yeah,
out.
I said, I mean, we didn't have it in a while. Maybe we should. I mean, now with Corona, it's a bit hard, but I mean,
I feel offended.
But we didn't do it in a while. I think we should revive the Monday shots as a tradition.
We should.
So maybe with like huge increasements of people, it will be like hard to like to follow.
Yeah, I think we will still be in a fairly sober range of hiring people.
5 people joining. Well, that's a good question to end with, for sure. The Monday shot.
Any other traditions? What you like?
You're not happy with the Monday shots, I see.
Not enough.
Well, I think we have quite a lot. I mean, we had frequent team events before that, and the team events also had a really funny tradition, which actually I think happened until the last team event. Now I mean, we couldn't have any more, at least non-virtual ones, but we had we always sang happy birthday for one particular colleague of ours at every team event, even without him not having birthday. And I think it happened because we were at one restaurant and we were so loud that we were at the verge of being kicked out. So that we told the waiters that it was that person's birthday, and so they were a bit more patient with us. Also, I think at some point it tipped because we were spending so much money on booze there that we were actually becoming profitable, even though the other people might have left because of us. So that was when this tradition was established, that we would always sing happy birthday for back then, I think, the youngest of our colleagues. But I don't know if that, I mean, they're all like real life traditions, right? I'm not giving, I mean, I can give you many of those, you know, with such a cool company traditions. Like, yeah, we have frequent team events. We drink beers on Friday together. We play kicker matches and stuff. But I mean, everybody does those, right?
I mean, no, not every company. So it's actually what for you is typical. It's not actually typical for other. So yeah, it's great that you like telling about this. Like it's normal. It's normal day. So here is like on the chat. Could you guys share your LinkedIn profiles?
Here is mine. Happy to be added.
I have to stop sharing to find mine.
So maybe in the meantime, like last question. Okay. So guys, like, thank you, Espen, Marco, for the event. It was like really nice, very nice meeting and presentation, and it was like really nice talking to you. I'm happy that everybody else joined. We have a quite good frequency. So thank you for the event and see you on the next one.
Thank you very much for having us.
Bye.
Thank you so much. And thank you guys for listening to us. And,
Yeah, thank you.
and have a
Thank
great
you.
Thursday.